Roger Downing stood in the editing bay, fingers flying across the keyboard as he scrubbed through footage of his latest documentary. The screen flickered with images of corruption in small-town politics, his specialty. At 34, he'd built a reputation for exposing the rot beneath glossy surfaces, for finding the truth people tried to bury. His production company, Clearwater Films, had 3 regional Emmys on the shelf and a reputation that made guilty men sweat. His phone buzzed. Lisa, his wife's name, lit up the screen with a photo from their wedding day 5 years ago, her dark hair catching the sunset. That smile that had stopped his heart the first time he saw it at a coffee shop in downtown Portland. "Hey, beautiful," he answered, saving his work. "Can you pick up Tommy from school today?" Lisa's voice carried that particular strain he'd been hearing more often lately. "Dad's asking if we can come to dinner tonight. Mom's making her lasagna." Roger felt that familiar tightness in his chest. Franklin Nash, his father-in-law, retired Air Force colonel, deacon at First Baptist, president of the Rotary Club. The kind of man who commanded every room he entered, whose handshake could make or break a business deal in their town of Riverside Falls, Oregon. The kind of man Roger had learned to tolerate for Lisa's sake, even though something about Franklin had always felt off, like a perfectly composed photograph that revealed something sinister in the shadows when you looked too closely. "Sure," Roger said. "Tell him we'll be there at 6. "You don't sound thrilled." "Your dad and I just have different philosophies, that's all." "He's trying, Roger. He really is. And Tommy adores him." That was the thing. 6-year-old Tommy Nash Downing did adore his grandfather. Franklin doted on the boy, took him fishing, taught him to throw a baseball. Last month, Tommy had spent an entire weekend at his grandparents' house while Roger and Lisa had taken a brief anniversary trip to the coast. Tommy had come home with stories of building model airplanes and eating ice cream for breakfast. "I know," Roger said. 6 o'clock. "We'll be there." After they hung up, Roger returned to his footage, but his concentration had fractured. He'd been working on this documentary for 8 months. A deep dive into how a beloved high school football coach had used his position to exploit students for years while the community looked away. The parallels weren't lost on him. Power. Trust. The way people refused to see what was right in front of them because the truth was too ugly. His partner, Jared Bean, knocked on the editing bay door. Jared was 10 years older, a former investigative journalist who'd transitioned to documentary work after his newspaper folded. He had the weathered look of someone who'd seen too much and still kept looking. "You heading out?" Jared asked. "Yeah, picking up Tommy. We've got dinner at the in-laws." Jared grimaced sympathetically. He'd met Franklin Nash once at a company barbecue. Later, he'd told Roger, "That man's smile doesn't reach his eyes." Roger grabbed his jacket. "I'll review the rest of the footage tomorrow. We need to be careful with how we present this. One wrong edit, and we give them ammunition to discredit everything." "That's why you're good at this," Jared said. "You understand that the truth isn't just about what happened. It's about making people see it." Tommy's elementary school let out at 3:15. Roger joined the stream of parents, nannies, and babysitters waiting by the fence. The autumn air carried the scent of fallen leaves and would smoke. Riverside Falls was the kind of town that appeared in tourism brochures. Population 30,000, nestled in the Cascade foothills, with a charming downtown of brick buildings and a river that ran clean and cold through the center. Tommy emerged from the crowd of children, his backpack nearly as big as he was. He had Lisa's dark eyes and Roger's unruly brown hair. When he spotted his father, his face lit up with that pure, uncomplicated joy that made Roger's heart ache with love. "Dad!" Tommy ran over, nearly tripping over his untied shoelaces. Roger caught him in a hug. "Hey, buddy. Good day. We learned about the water cycle, and I got a gold star on my spelling test." "That's my guy." Roger ruffled his hair. "Your mom says we're having dinner at Grandpa Franklin's tonight." Something flickered across Tommy's face, too quick to read, but Roger caught it. A shadow. A hesitation. That's good," Tommy said, but his voice had lost its enthusiasm. "You okay?" "Yeah." Tommy bent down to tie his shoe, his small fingers fumbling with the laces. "Can we go to the park first? Just for a little while?" Roger checked his watch. They had time. "Sure, buddy." Riverside Park. Tommy nodded, and they walked the 3 blocks to the park, Tommy chattering about his friend Mason's birthday party coming up next month, about how he wanted to be a scientist when he grew up, maybe study volcanoes or tornadoes or something that explodes in a cool way. Roger listened, really listened, the way he'd learned to do through years of interviewing subjects, hearing not just the words but the spaces between them, the things people didn't say. Something was different about Tommy lately. The nightmares that woke him crying 3 times last week. The way he'd started sucking his thumb again, a habit he'd broken 2 years ago. The reluctance to visit his grandparents, even though he'd never said anything directly. Lisa had wanted to take Tommy to a child psychologist, but Franklin had talked her out of it. The boy's fine, he'd said in that authoritative voice of his. Kids go through phases. Don't make a big deal out of nothing and plant ideas in his head. Roger had disagreed, but Lisa had sided with her father. That had been a rare argument between them, tense and unresolved. At the park, Tommy headed for the swings, but Roger noticed he kept looking over his shoulder toward the parking lot, as if checking to see who else was there. Only a few other parents with younger children occupied the playground. "Dad, can you push me?" Tommy called from the swing. Roger obliged, sending his son arcing into the blue October sky. Tommy's laughter rang out, genuine and sweet, and for a moment, everything felt normal. Just a father and son at a park on a Tuesday afternoon. Then Tommy dragged his feet in the wood chips, slowing the swing. He climbed off and walked toward the benches, away from the other children. Roger followed. That instinct, the same one that had helped him uncover so many hidden stories, prickling at the base of his skull. "Dad," Tommy said softly. He looked around again, then tugged on Roger's sleeve. "Don't react. Just look at my ankle." The words were too mature for a 6-year-old. Too deliberate. They sounded rehearsed, like something Tommy had been working up the courage to say. Roger felt his world tilt slightly, the way it did when an interview subject said something that changed everything. He knelt down slowly, keeping his expression neutral despite the sudden hammering of his heart. "Here, buddy, let me tie your shoe properly," he said, his voice steady. He pulled up the hem of Tommy's jeans, pretending to adjust his sock. What he saw made him stop breathing. Ring-shaped bruises circled Tommy's ankle like a bracelet, dark purple and yellowing at the edges, in different stages of healing. They were unmistakable. The marks of someone's fingers gripping, squeezing. Adult-sized fingers. And this wasn't the first time. The yellowing bruises meant this had been happening for weeks, maybe months. Roger's vision went white at the edges. A roaring sound filled his ears. Every instinct screamed at him to react, to demand answers, to rage against whoever had hurt his child. But he'd spent years training himself to control his reactions, to never show his hand until he had all the facts. "Got it," he said calmly, adjusting Tommy's sock to cover the bruises. He looked up at his son's face and saw terror there. Terror and a desperate hope. Tommy was watching him intently, waiting to see if his father would save him or fail him. Roger smiled, though it felt like his face might crack. "Come on, buddy. Let's head home." He picked Tommy up, something he rarely did anymore since Tommy had declared himself too old for baby stuff, and carried him to the car. Tommy wrapped his arms around Roger's neck and buried his face in his shoulder. Roger felt his son's body trembling. "It's okay," Roger whispered. "I've got you. Nobody's going to hurt you anymore. I promise." He buckled Tommy into his booster seat, keeping his movements calm and measured, though fury was building in his chest like a storm surge. Once in the driver's seat, Roger didn't head home. He drove straight to Riverside Memorial Hospital, the only hospital in town. Tommy didn't ask why. He sat in the back seat, clutching the toy dinosaur he'd had since he was 3, and stared out the window. Roger pulled out his phone as he drove. He scrolled through his contacts, past Lisa's name. He couldn't call her yet, not until he knew what he was dealing with, past Jared's, past his brother Michael's. He stopped at a name he hadn't called in 2 years, Dr. Caroline Zhang, forensic pediatrician at Oregon Health Sciences University in Portland. He'd interviewed her for a documentary about child abuse in religious institutions. She'd been brilliant, compassionate, and utterly uncompromising in her pursuit of justice for children. Roger pulled into the hospital parking lot and sat for a moment, his hand hovering over the call button. Then he pressed it. "Dr. Zhang," she answered on the second ring. "Caroline, it's Roger Downing. I need your help. It's my son." The emergency room at Riverside Memorial smelled of antiseptic and fear. Roger carried Tommy through the automatic doors, bypassed the registration desk, and approached the triage nurse with the kind of quiet authority that made people pay attention. "My son needs to be examined. There are signs of abuse. I'm requesting a full documentation protocol, and I need you to page Dr. Caroline Zhang at OHSU. She's expecting my call." The nurse, Amy Kirk, according to her name tag, took one look at Roger's face and didn't argue. She escorted them to a private examination room immediately. "I'll get the attending," she said. "Don't touch anything. We'll need to photograph everything exactly as it is." Roger nodded. He'd interviewed enough victims, enough investigators. He knew the drill. Evidence, chain of custody, documentation, the framework that would build a case strong enough to destroy whoever had done this. Tommy sat on the examination table, his legs dangling over the edge. He looked so small in the sterile room with its bright lights and medical equipment. "Dad," Tommy's voice was tiny. "Is Grandpa Franklin going to be mad?" The world stopped spinning. Roger's mind, trained to connect disparate facts into coherent narratives, assembled the truth in an instant. The weekends at the grandparents' house, the nightmares, the regression, Franklin's insistence that Tommy was fine, that they shouldn't seek professional help, Marion Nash's nervous hovering, her constant need to smooth things over. The way Franklin always wanted alone time with Tommy, took him fishing or on special grandfather-grandson trips. Roger crossed to the examination table and crouched down, taking Tommy's small hands in his. "Tommy, I need you to listen to me very carefully. You're not in trouble. You did nothing wrong. Do you understand? Nothing that happened is your fault." Tears spilled down Tommy's cheeks. He said I couldn't tell. He said nobody would believe me because he's important and I'm just a kid. He said you and Mom would be mad at me. Roger's hands were shaking now. He clasped them together to still them. "I believe you. Your mom will believe you. And I'm not mad at you. I'm proud of you for telling me." He said it was our special secret, that all grandpas do this with their grandsons. "But it hurts, Dad. It hurts, and I don't like it." "I know, buddy. I know." Roger pulled Tommy into a hug, gentle, careful not to cause any more pain. Over his son's shoulder, he could see his own reflection in the metal paper towel dispenser, and he didn't recognize the man staring back. That man's eyes were cold and dark and promised violence. Dr. William Oywin, the attending physician, entered with Nurse Amy and another nurse who introduced herself as Alexis Franklin. Dr. Irwin was in his 50s, with silver hair and the weathered competence of someone who'd seen everything. "Mr. Downing, I understand we have a sensitive situation." His voice was kind but professional. "Dr. Zhang is being consulted remotely. She's asked that we follow the APSIC guidelines for child forensic interviews. We'll need to examine Tommy, take photographs, and collect any evidence. I'm also going to request that a social worker and law enforcement be present." "Do it," Roger said. "Document everything." The examination took 90 minutes. Roger waited in an adjacent room, staring at a poster about hand-washing protocols without seeing it. Detective Alejandro Ellison from the Riverside Falls Police Department arrived, along with Merle Sears from Child Protective Services. Roger gave his statement. Factual, clinical, emotionless. He'd save emotion for later, when he could use it. Dr. Caroline Zhang appeared via video call on a laptop, conferring with Dr. Irwin. Roger watched her face on the screen, saw her professional mask slip for just a moment when she reviewed the findings, saw the anger flash in her eyes before she locked it away. When they finally let Roger back into the room, Tommy was dressed and sitting quietly. Dr. Irwin's expression told Roger everything he needed to know. "The bruising pattern is consistent with restraint," Dr. Irwin said quietly, out of Tommy's earshot. "Multiple instances over an extended period. We found evidence of healed injuries as well. Detective Ellison will need to conduct a formal forensic interview with Tommy, But based on what we've documented and what Tommy has disclosed, we have enough to move forward with a report to law enforcement and CPS. Who did this? Detective Ellison asked Roger. He was younger than Roger expected, mid-30s, with sharp eyes and an intensity that suggested he took these cases personally. Roger met his gaze. My father-in-law, Colonel Franklin Nash, retired. He watched recognition flicker across both Ellison's and Sears' faces. Franklin Nash wasn't just anybody in Riverside Falls. He was a pillar of the community. This was going to be complicated. We'll need to interview him, Ellison said. But these are serious allegations against a prominent citizen. We need to build an airtight case. You'll have one, Roger said. I'll make sure of it. Roger called Lisa from the hospital parking lot as Tommy dozed in the back seat, exhausted from the ordeal. It was nearly 8 o'clock. They'd missed dinner at Franklin's house. Roger, where are you? Lisa's voice was frantic. Dad's been calling. We were supposed to be there 2 hours ago. He's worried something happened. We're at the hospital. Lisa, I need you to meet me at home. Don't go to your parents' house. Come straight home. What? Is Tommy okay? What happened? He's physically okay. But there's something we need to talk about. Something serious. You're scaring me. I know. I'm sorry. But please, just come home. The drive back felt surreal. Roger kept glancing in the rearview mirror at Tommy's sleeping face, and each time, the rage inside him grew colder and more focused. He'd spent his career exposing predators, shining lights into dark corners, forcing communities to confront ugly truths. He'd always maintained professional distance. That was done now. Franklin Nash had hurt his son, had violated the most sacred trust imaginable. And Roger was going to make sure he paid for it in ways that went beyond a courtroom. But first, he needed to tell Lisa. And that conversation was going to shatter her world. When they pulled into the driveway of their craftsman-style house on Maple Street, Lisa's car was already there. She burst out the front door as Roger was unbuckling Tommy. What's going on? Roger, talk to me. He carried Tommy inside, Lisa following, her questions cascading. He tucked Tommy into bed. The boy barely woke up and then led Lisa downstairs to the kitchen. Sit down, he said gently. You're terrifying me. What happened? Roger sat across from her at the kitchen table, the same table where they'd eaten breakfast that morning, where they'd planned their future, where everything had been normal just hours ago. Tommy showed me bruises today, at the park. He watched her face, saw confusion before comprehension. Bruises that indicate prolonged physical abuse. I took him to the hospital. They documented everything. He told the doctors who did it. Lisa's face had gone white. Who? Roger, who would? Your father. The words hung between them like a blade. Lisa's mouth opened, closed. She shook her head. No, that's not possible. My father would never. The bruises are real, Lisa. The doctors confirmed it. Tommy told them details. There's evidence. This has been happening for months. You're wrong. She stood up, her chair scraping loudly. Tommy's confused, or someone else. This is a mistake. My father loves Tommy. He would die before he'd hurt him. Roger stood too, reached for her hands. She jerked away. I know this is hard to hear. Hard to hear? You're accusing my father of child abuse. Do you understand what you're saying? Do you understand what this will do to him, to our family? What about what it's done to Tommy? What's still doing to him? He's been having nightmares, Lisa. He's been terrified. And we didn't see it because we didn't want to see it. I don't believe you. Tears were streaming down her face now. I don't believe any of this. My father is a good man. Everyone knows that. He's respected. He's helped people. He's hurting our son. Lisa grabbed her purse, her keys. I need to talk to him. I need to hear his side. Don't. Roger moved to block the door. Please, Lisa, don't tell him anything yet. The police need to conduct their investigation without him being tipped off. Get out of my way, Roger. Think about Tommy. Just think about Tommy for 1 second. She stared at him, and he saw the moment her world cracked open. That terrible instant when cognitive dissonance gave way to the possibility that everything she believed might be a lie. Her father, her hero, the man who'd raised her, protected her, been there for every milestone. I can't, she whispered. I can't believe this. Not without talking to him first. She pushed past Roger and out the door. He heard her car start, heard her peel out of the driveway with uncharacteristic recklessness. Roger stood in the kitchen, alone, and made his second phone call of the evening. Detective Ellison answered immediately. "Mr. Downing, my wife just left to confront her father. She doesn't believe Tommy's disclosure. You need to get to Franklin Nash's house before she tips him off. If he destroys evidence or flees." "I'm already in my car," Ellison said. "We've got a patrol unit 2 minutes from the Nash residence. Nobody's going anywhere." Roger hung up and looked at the clock. 8:45. In the space of 6 hours, his entire life had detonated. But this was just the beginning. He went upstairs to check on Tommy, found him still sleeping, his face peaceful in a way it hadn't been in months. Roger sat on the edge of the bed and smoothed back his son's hair. "I'm going to fix this," he whispered. "I promise you, buddy. I'm going to make sure you're safe. And I'm going to make sure he never hurts anyone again." His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Detective Ellison's partner, Officer Ray Horton. Your wife arrived at the Nash residence. We're here. Colonel Nash has been informed he needs to come to the station for questioning. Things are about to get loud." Roger texted back, "Keep me updated." Then he went down to his home office, booted up his computer, and began what he did best, building a case. If the legal system moved slowly, if Franklin's connections and reputation gave him advantages, if the investigation got tangled in politics and small-town loyalties, then Roger would build a parallel case. One that would destroy Franklin Nash in the court of public opinion if the legal system failed. He pulled up every file he had on investigative techniques, every contact he'd cultivated, every dirty trick he'd learned in 15 years of documentary filmmaking. Franklin Nash thought he was untouchable because he had power, had respect, had the right last name in the right town. But Roger Downing had something more dangerous. The truth, the skills to expose it, and absolutely nothing left to lose. At 11 o'clock, headlights swept across the living room window. Lisa's car in the driveway. Roger heard her come in, heard her footsteps on the stairs. She appeared in the doorway of his office, her face ravaged by tears, her mascara smeared. "They arrested him," she said, her voice hollow. "They arrested my father. They took him to the police station in handcuffs. In front of the neighbors. In front of everyone." Roger waited. There was more coming. "My mother is hysterical. She's calling lawyers. She's saying this is all a misunderstanding, that Tommy must have hurt himself playing and blamed Dad because he was scared of getting in trouble." Lisa's voice broke. "But Dad's face, Roger. When the police said why they were there, when they said what Tommy claimed, his face. What about it?" Lisa sank into the chair across from his desk. He looked afraid. For just a second before he put on his angry, indignant mask. He looked afraid. She covered her face with her hands. Oh God, what if you're right? What if he did do this? How did I not see it? How did I not protect my own son?" Roger moved around the desk, knelt beside her chair. This time when he took her hands, she let him. "It's not your fault," he said. "Predators are good at hiding. They're good at creating perfect public personas. That's how they operate. What do we do now? We protect Tommy. We cooperate with the investigation. And we make sure Franklin Nash never has access to another child." Lisa nodded, wiping her eyes. "Mom's going to fight this. She won't believe it. She'll defend him. I know. This is going to tear our family apart." "It already has been torn apart," Roger said. "We're just finally seeing it." They sat together in the quiet house, the weight of what came next settling over them like ash. Tomorrow, the news would spread through Riverside Falls like wildfire. Tomorrow, battle lines would be drawn. Tomorrow, Roger would have to watch his son testify about unspeakable things. But tonight, Tommy was safe in his bed, and Franklin Nash was in a cell at the police station, his carefully constructed life beginning to crumble. Roger stood, helped Lisa to her feet. "Come on, let's get some sleep. We're going to need our strength." As they walked upstairs, Roger's phone buzzed one more time. A text from Jared. "Just saw the news. Holy shit, man. Whatever you need. Whatever you need to burn this guy to the ground. I'm in." Roger typed back. "Tomorrow. We start tomorrow." He deleted the text thread and climbed into bed next to Lisa, who was crying softly. He held her while she grieved for the father she'd thought she had, for the innocence they'd all lost, for the long fight ahead. But Roger didn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling and planned. Because 6 hours after seeing those bruises on his son's ankle, Franklin Nash had just received his first taste of consequences. And Roger was going to make sure it was only the beginning. The morning sun filtered through the bedroom curtains with the kind of cruel cheerfulness that made tragedy feel surreal. Roger had maybe managed 2 hours of broken sleep before Tommy's small voice from the hallway pulled him fully awake. "Mom? Dad?" Lisa sat up immediately, her eyes red and swollen. Roger squeezed her hand once before they both got out of bed. Tommy stood in the hallway in his dinosaur pajamas, looking uncertain. "Is Grandpa Franklin really mad at me?" Lisa's face crumpled, but she held it together long enough to kneel down and pull Tommy into a hug. "No, baby. Nobody's mad at you. You didn't do anything wrong. But the police came last night. Mrs. Henderson from next door called and told her friend that Grandpa got arrested. I heard her talking when I was getting my backpack from the porch. Small towns. Roger should have anticipated that the news would spread instantly. Riverside Falls had maybe 6 degrees of separation on a good day. "Tommy, come sit with us," Roger said, leading them all to the living room couch. He positioned himself so Tommy was between him and Lisa, the three of them forming a protective unit. "What happened to you is serious. When grown-ups hurt kids, the police get involved to make sure it doesn't happen again. Do you understand?" Tommy nodded slowly. "So Grandpa Franklin is in trouble?" "Yes." "Good." The word came out fierce, and Roger saw something he hadn't seen in his son in months. Anger. Healthy, justified anger. "I'm glad he's in trouble. I'm glad the police came." Lisa made a small sound. Grief and pride tangled together. She kissed Tommy's head. "You were so brave telling Dad. So brave." The doorbell rang. All three of them tensed. Roger checked his phone. 7:30 in the morning, too early for good news. He looked through the peephole and saw Detective Ellison and a woman he didn't recognize, blonde, late 40s, wearing a business suit and carrying a briefcase. Roger opened the door. "Detective, Mr. Downing, this is ADA Marissa Donovan from the District Attorney's Office. We need to talk about next steps." They settled in the kitchen, Roger and Lisa on one side of the table, Ellison and Donovan on the other. Tommy was set up in the living room with cartoons and a bowl of cereal, far enough away not to overhear, but close enough that Roger could see him. ADA Donovan got straight to business. Colonel Nash was questioned last night. He denied all allegations. He claims Tommy is fabricating this story because the colonel disciplined him recently for misbehavior. He's retained Clifton DeLeon as his attorney. Roger knew that name. Clifton DeLeon was the most expensive defense attorney in a 100-mile radius, known for getting wealthy clients out of ugly situations. Nash posted bail an hour ago. Ellison added. He's been released with conditions. No contact with Tommy. No contact with any minors. Surrender of passport. GPS monitoring. You let him out? Lisa's voice was sharp with disbelief. He hurt our son, and you let him out? The bail schedule and his lack of criminal history meant we couldn't hold him, Donovan said. But I promise you, we're building a case. The medical evidence is strong. Tommy's disclosure is consistent and detailed. And Dr. Zhang's forensic report leaves no room for ambiguity about the bruising patterns. What about other victims? Roger asked. He'd been thinking about this all night. Franklin had access to dozens of children through his position at the church, through his community activities. Has anyone else come forward? Donovan and Ellison exchanged a glance. Not yet, Donovan said. But these cases often open floodgates. Once one victim speaks up, others find their courage. We're reaching out to families whose children had contact with Nash, but it's delicate. We can't make direct accusations without evidence. I can help with that, Roger said. I'm a documentary filmmaker. I've done this before. Found victims who were afraid to come forward, created environments where they felt safe telling their stories. Mr. Downing, I appreciate your professional expertise, but you're also the father of a victim. That creates complications. With respect, ADA Donovan, I know how to keep my emotions separate from my work. And I know how to find the truth when people are trying to hide it. Donovan studied him. Walk me through how you'd approach this. Roger leaned forward. Franklin Nash has been active in this community for 30 years. He coached Little League. He ran youth programs at the church. He volunteered at the elementary school. That's hundreds of children with varying degrees of access. Standard investigation protocol will interview them formally, with parents present, in intimidating settings. Most kids won't disclose under those circumstances, especially if they think their parents won't believe them, or if their parents are friends with Nash. So what's your alternative? Create a documentary project about child safety. Interview families conversationally, casually. Let children talk in comfortable settings, without the weight of an official investigation hanging over them. I've seen it work before. Kids will tell you things in a living room that they'd never say in a police station. Ellison frowned. That's not admissible evidence. Anything obtained that way would get torn apart in court. But it would give you leads. It would tell you where to look, who to talk to officially, and it would create public awareness. Right now, Franklin Nash is calling this a vindictive father making false accusations. If other families start asking questions, start looking at their own children's behavior, the narrative changes. Donovan tapped her pen against her legal pad. You have to disclose your bias. You couldn't present yourself as a neutral journalist. I'm not planning to. I'll be very clear about who I am and why I'm asking questions. Transparency builds trust. Lisa had been quiet, but now she spoke up. What about my mother? Marion. She's going to fight this. She's already calling everyone we know, telling them this is a misunderstanding. That's all right, Donovan said gently, but it also might work in our favor. The more publicly she defends him, the more suspicious it looks when evidence contradicts her statements. She's my mother, Lisa said, her voice breaking. She's not evil. She spent 40 years building her life around him. If he's guilty, it means her entire existence was a lie. Roger reached over and took her hand. He understood that pain, the realization that someone you loved was capable of monstrous things. But his sympathy had its limits. Marion Nash might be a victim of deception, but she was also choosing, right now, to defend an abuser. We need to focus on Tommy, Roger said. What happens next for him? Donovan pulled out a folder. He'll need to do a formal forensic interview at the Child Advocacy Center in Eugene. They're the regional experts. It'll be recorded, and the recording can be used in court so Tommy doesn't have to testify in person unless absolutely necessary. After that, we'll assess whether we have enough for charges. You don't have enough yet. Roger's voice was hard. You have medical evidence. You have Tommy's disclosure. What more do you need? We have enough to arrest and charge, Ellison clarified. But ADA Donovan wants to make sure this case is bulletproof before it goes to trial. Clifton DeLeon will attack every angle. He'll question the bruising. Could Tommy have gotten them playing? He'll question the disclosure. Did someone coach Tommy? He'll question your motives, Mr. Downing. He'll paint you as a vengeful son-in-law who's always disliked Franklin and is using your child to settle scores. Let him try, Roger said. I've documented everything. I have the hospital records, the doctor's statements, the timeline. And I have Tommy's truth. Juries are unpredictable when it comes to beloved community figures, Donovan said, especially in small towns. We need more than just Tommy's case. We need a pattern. We need to show this wasn't one incident, one misunderstanding, but systematic abuse. Then that's what we'll find, Roger said. After Ellison and Donovan left, Roger made coffee while Lisa sat at the table, staring at nothing. Tommy had fallen asleep on the couch, exhausted by the emotional toll of the past 24 hours. I need to tell my brother, Lisa said finally. Alan, he deserves to know. Alan Johnston lived in Seattle, worked in tech, visited Riverside Falls twice a year for holidays. He and Franklin had a cordial but distant relationship. Alan had never quite lived up to Franklin's expectations, had never joined the military or pursued the kind of traditionally masculine career path Franklin valued. Do you think Franklin ever hurt Alan? Roger asked carefully. Lisa's face went pale. God, I never even... Roger, what if he did? What if Alan went through this, and I never knew? Call him. Ask him to come down. This conversation needs to happen face to face. While Lisa made the call, Roger went to his office and opened his laptop. He pulled up his contacts list, started making notes. Documentary filmmaking wasn't just about cameras and editing. It was about research, investigation, building a web of information until patterns emerged. He created a timeline. Every instance he could remember of Tommy spending time alone with Franklin. The sleepovers, the fishing trips, the grandfather-grandson special time. He noted Tommy's behavioral changes. When the nightmares started 3 months ago, when the thumb-sucking resumed 2 months ago, when Tommy started resisting visits to his grandparents' house 6 weeks ago. Then he started a second document, Franklin Nash's community involvement. Every organization, every program, every place where Franklin had access to children. It was a disturbing list. First Baptist Church youth programs, 15 years. Little League coaching, 12 years. Elementary school volunteer reading program, 8 years. Boy Scouts troop leader, 5 years, retired 2 years ago. Rotary Club youth mentorship program, ongoing. Veterans Organization youth outreach, ongoing. Hundreds of children, maybe thousands over the course of 3 decades. Roger's phone rang. Jared. I'm outside, Jared said. Can I come in? Roger found his partner, standing on the front porch with 2 bags of groceries and a determined expression. Figured you guys might not be up for cooking, Jared said. Also figured you might need someone to talk to who isn't a cop or a lawyer. They sat in Roger's office, door closed, while Jared listened to everything. The park, the hospital, the arrest, the plan to investigate further. This is going to get ugly, Jared said finally. Franklin Nash has friends. Real friends. Judge Guillermo McCall plays golf with him. Sheriff Brandon Monroe served with him in the Air Force. The mayor, Oliver Cannon. Nash ran his campaign 3 years ago. I know. Do you? Because I'm not sure you do. Roger, they're going to close ranks around him. They're going to make your life hell. They're going to question everything about you. Your marriage, your business, your character. And they're going to do it publicly. Let them. Your documentary work won't save you from this. In fact, it's going to make you a target. They'll say you're exploiting your son's trauma for professional gain. They'll say you're creating a witch hunt for attention. Roger met his friend's eyes. What would you do if it was your kid? Jared leaned back in his chair. I'd burn the whole fucking town down to protect him, which is why I'm here. You're going to need help. You're going to need someone watching your back while you watch Tommy's. I need you to do something for me, Roger said. Research Clifton DeLeon. Find out every case he's defended, every trick he's used, every weakness in his strategy. I want to know how he operates so we can anticipate his moves. Done. What else? Start pulling permits and records for every property Franklin Nash owns or has access to. If he's been abusing children for years, there might be a location, a cabin, a storage unit, somewhere he took them. There might be evidence we haven't found yet. Jared nodded, making notes. What about social media? I can scrub Franklin's profiles, his friends' profiles, look for photos, connections, anything that might lead to other victims. Do it, but be subtle. I don't want him knowing we're digging. Roger. Jared's voice was serious. Be careful. I know you want justice for Tommy, but don't do anything that could compromise the legal case. Don't give DeLeon ammunition to claim you're conducting a vigilante investigation. I won't. But even as Roger said it, he knew that line was going to get blurry. Because the truth was, he didn't fully trust the legal system to deliver justice. He'd seen too many powerful men walk away from accusations. He'd documented too many cases where victims were discredited, where evidence was dismissed, where juries couldn't believe that someone so respected could be so monstrous. If the system failed Tommy, Roger would have to find another way to make Franklin Nash pay. And he was already thinking about what that might look like. That afternoon, while Lisa took Tommy to the Child Advocacy Center in Eugene for his forensic interview, Roger paid a visit to someone he hadn't seen in 5 years. His brother, Michael Downing. Michael lived on the outskirts of Riverside Falls in a small house he'd inherited from their parents. He worked as a mechanic at the Ford dealership, had never married, kept to himself. The brothers had a complicated relationship. Roger had gotten the education, the career, the picture-perfect life, while Michael had stayed in their hometown, steady and unremarkable. Michael answered the door in grease-stained coveralls, a beer in hand despite it being 3 in the afternoon. Roger. Heard about the shit with Franklin. Whole town's talking. Can I come in? They sat in Michael's cluttered living room, the TV on mute, showing a NASCAR race. How's Tommy? Michael asked. Scared. Brave. Dealing with it better than I would have at his age. And Lisa? Torn apart. Her father's a monster, and she spent her whole life thinking he was a hero. Michael took a long drink. Always thought there was something off about Franklin. Too perfect, you know? Nobody's that clean. That's actually why I'm here, Roger said. I need you to tell me about Dad. Michael's expression shuddered. Why? Because I've been thinking about why I didn't see what Franklin was. And I realized it's because I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to believe someone could be that good at hiding who they really are. But Dad wasn't he? Their father, Richard Downing, had died of a heart attack when Roger was in college. He'd been a contractor, well-liked in the community, a weekend hunter and fisherman. And he'd been a mean drunk who took his frustrations out on his sons, particularly Michael, who wasn't as academically gifted as Roger. You got out, Michael said quietly. You went to college, moved to Portland, came back here with your fancy career and your nice house. I stayed. I remember it all. I remember it too. I just pretended I didn't. Dad never hit you the way he hit me. You were the golden boy. He had expectations for you, so he went easier. I know. And I'm sorry I left you alone with him. Michael looked at him, surprised. Why are you bringing this up now? Because I let Tommy spend time with Franklin Nash without really paying attention to what was happening. I saw what I wanted to see, a loving grandfather, family bonds, normal stuff. I ignored the warning signs because acknowledging them would have been uncomfortable. Just like I ignored what Dad did to you because acknowledging it would have meant standing up to him. And I was a coward. You were a kid. So was Tommy, and I was supposed to protect him. Roger leaned forward. I'm not going to make the same mistake twice. I'm going to destroy Franklin Nash. But I need to know, am I doing this for the right reasons? Or am I doing it because I failed to protect my own brother and now I'm overcompensating? Michael was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, You're doing it because it's the right thing to do. Because Tommy deserves better. Because if you don't stop Nash, he'll hurt someone else. That's not overcompensation. That's justice. Will you help me? Ow! I need someone who knows this town, who flies under the radar, who can ask questions without drawing attention. You know people I don't know. You hear things I don't hear. The mechanic, the guy at the bar. People talk to you because you're not a threat. Michael smiled slightly. You want me to be your spy. I want you to be my brother. The way I should have been yours. Michael finished his beer, crushed the can in his hand. All right. I'm in. What do you need? Start with Franklin's friends from the Veterans Organization. The guys he served with. People trust veterans, confide in them. If Franklin has any dirty secrets, someone in that circle knows about them. They might not think of it as relevant, but if you ask the right questions, I'll see what I can dig up. But Roger, this town loves Franklin Nash. You're going to make enemies doing this. I already have enemies. At least now I know who they are. Tommy's forensic interview took 3 hours. When Lisa brought him home, Tommy went straight to his room without speaking. Lisa looked hollowed out, aged a decade in a single day. He told them everything, she said to Roger in the hallway. In detail. Things I can't unhear. Things that make me want to. She trailed off, shaking. Roger held her. I know. The interviewer said he's a credible witness. His story is consistent, detailed, age-appropriate. There's no evidence he was coached. But Clifton DeLeon is going to try to destroy him anyway. He's going to put our 6-year-old son on trial. Not if I can help it, Roger said. That night, after Tommy fell asleep and Lisa retreated to take a bath, Roger sat at his computer and began drafting an email. He addressed it to every parent he knew whose children had contact with Franklin Nash through church, through Little League, through any of the programs Franklin had been involved with over the years. The email was careful, measured, professional. It explained what had happened to Tommy. It encouraged other parents to talk to their children, to watch for warning signs, to come forward if they had concerns. It provided resources for reporting and support. And it ended with Roger's contact information and an invitation to speak with him confidentially. Before he sent it, Roger called ADA Donovan. I'm about to do something that might piss you off, he said. But I think it's necessary. He explained the email. Donovan was silent for a moment. If you send that, Franklin's attorney will claim you're conducting a campaign to manufacture victims. He'll say you're creating hysteria, leading children to make false accusations. It could hurt the case, or it could break the case wide open. How many victims do you think are out there, staying silent because they think they're the only ones? Another pause. Send it, but be prepared for the backlash. And Roger? Keep a record of every response you get. Document everything. If this turns into a circus, we need to prove you were acting in good faith. Roger hit send. The email went out to 73 addresses. Every parent in Tommy's class, every family at First Baptist Church, every Little League family from the past 5 years that he could track down. Within an hour, his phone started ringing. The first call was from Susan Connor, whose son had been on Franklin's Little League team 3 years ago. Her voice was shaking. Mr. Downing? I got your email. And I think something might have happened to my son too. He's been having nightmares about baseball practice. About Coach Nash. I thought it was just anxiety about striking out, but now... Would you be willing to talk to the police? Roger asked, his heart racing. I don't know. My husband plays poker with Franklin. He's going to say I'm overreacting. But I need to know. I need to know if my son is okay. Talk to your son. Create a safe space for him to tell you if something happened. And then call Detective Ellison. He's handling the investigation. He'll treat you and your son with respect. The second call was from Brandy Haynes, the mother of a girl who'd been in the church youth program. My daughter won't talk about Nash. She shuts down completely when I mention him. I thought it was because she's a teenager and embarrassed about church stuff. But your email? God, what if I missed something? Roger took notes, collected names, built a network. By midnight, he had 12 families who had concerns, who were willing to talk to investigators, who were looking at their children's behavior through a new, horrifying lens. And he had 37 responses calling him a monster, accusing him of destroying a good man's reputation, threatening to sue him for libel. Several people told him he was no longer welcome at First Baptist Church. One message from Judge McCall's wife said simply, "You should be ashamed of yourself. Franklin Nash is twice the man you'll ever be." Roger saved every message as Donovan had advised. Documentation. Evidence. The paper trail that would matter when this went to court. At 1 a.m., he finally shut down his computer. Lisa was asleep in their bed, exhausted. Roger stood in the doorway of Tommy's room, watching his son sleep. The bruises on Tommy's ankle were fading to yellow-green, healing physically. But Roger knew the real wounds would take years to heal, might never fully heal. His son's innocence had been stolen by someone who was supposed to protect him, to love him. And Roger was going to make sure Franklin Nash never hurt another child again, no matter what it took. The next morning brought a new crisis. Roger's phone rang at 6 a.m. Michael calling, his voice tight with urgency. Turn on the local news. Channel 7. Roger stumbled downstairs, flipped on the TV. The morning news anchor, a woman Roger vaguely recognized from local events, was interviewing none other than Clifton DeLeon. These accusations against Colonel Nash are completely fabricated, DeLeon was saying smoothly. He had the polished look of someone who'd spent his career in front of cameras. Silver hair, expensive suit, a face that radiated trustworthiness. My client is a decorated veteran, a pillar of this community, and a devoted grandfather. What we're seeing here is a bitter family dispute being manipulated by a father who has professional experience in creating compelling but false narratives. Mr. Downing is a documentary filmmaker, someone who knows how to shape a story, how to coach people to say what he wants them to say. It's no coincidence that he's now sending mass emails trying to drum up additional accusers. This is a witch hunt, pure and simple. The anchor nodded sympathetically. What does Colonel Nash have to say about these allegations? The camera cut to Franklin Nash himself, sitting in what Roger recognized as the Nash family living room. Franklin looked older than Roger remembered, more frail, a calculated image of a wounded elderly man being persecuted. "I love my grandson," Franklin said, his voice trembling slightly. "I love all children. The suggestion that I would ever harm a child is beyond comprehension." Tommy is going through something, clearly, some kind of behavioral issue or confusion. And rather than getting him proper help, my son-in-law has chosen to destroy my reputation. It's heartbreaking. Roger felt his hands clench into fists. The performance was masterful. Franklin looked like a victim, sounded like a victim. Anyone watching who didn't know the truth would absolutely believe him. The segment ended with De Leon announcing that Franklin was considering filing a defamation lawsuit against Roger and would be holding a press conference at noon to address the false allegations in detail. Roger's phone exploded with texts. Jared, did you see this bullshit? Michael, he's good. Too good. Lisa from upstairs, oh my God. Roger, turn on the TV. And then a text from an unknown number. You're going to regret this. You're going to lose everything. Back off while you still can. Roger forwarded the message to Detective Ellison with a note. Potential threat. Please document. By 7 a.m., Roger's email inbox was flooded with new messages. Half were from people condemning him, telling him he destroyed a good man. The other half were from parents who'd seen Franklin's interview and were now even more suspicious, because Franklin's performance had been too perfect, too rehearsed, too much like someone who'd been preparing for this accusation. Roger showered, dressed, drank 3 cups of coffee. He needed to respond, needed to control the narrative before Franklin's PR campaign destroyed Tommy's credibility. At 8 a.m., he called a press conference of his own. The Clearwater Films office wasn't large, but it had a conference room that could fit a decent crowd. Roger set up his own cameras. He'd document this properly. Jared sent out press releases to every media outlet within 100 miles. By 10 a.m., they had 15 reporters, 3 news crews, and a smattering of curious onlookers. Roger stood at a podium with Lisa beside him, holding a folder full of documents. He debated whether to include Lisa, but she'd insisted. I need to show that I believe Tommy, she'd said, that his own mother believes him. The camera started rolling. Roger took a breath and began. My name is Roger Downing. 3 days ago, my 6-year-old son disclosed to me that he had been physically abused by his grandfather, Franklin Nash. I took him immediately to the hospital, where medical professionals documented extensive bruising consistent with prolonged abuse. My son was then interviewed by trained forensic specialists at the Child Advocacy Center. His disclosure was consistent, detailed, and credible. There is no question in my mind, or in the minds of the medical professionals and law enforcement officials involved, that Franklin Nash hurt my son. A reporter called out, but Mr. De Leon says you're fabricating this. I'm not finished. Roger's voice was hard. Franklin Nash appeared on television this morning to proclaim his innocence and to paint himself as a victim. He's entitled to defend himself. But let me be clear, this is not a family dispute. This is not a misunderstanding. This is child abuse. And I will not stand by while Franklin Nash uses his reputation and his connections to avoid accountability. Lisa stepped forward. I'm Lisa Downing, Franklin Nash's daughter. When Roger first told me what Tommy disclosed, I didn't want to believe it. My father was my hero. I spent my whole life thinking he was the best man I knew. But I've had to accept the truth. My father hurt my son. And as much as it breaks my heart, I believe Tommy. And I will stand by him no matter what. The room exploded with questions. Roger raised his hand for silence. Yesterday, I sent an email to families in this community whose children had contact with Franklin Nash through his various volunteer activities. I did this because I believe Tommy may not be Franklin's only victim. Since sending that email, 12 families have contacted me with concerns about their own children. That's 12 families who are now asking questions they never thought they'd have to ask. Detective Alejandro Ellison and the Riverside Falls Police Department are following up on all of these leads. Mr. Downing, a reporter from the Riverside Gazette shouted, are you suggesting there's a broader pattern of abuse? I'm suggesting that when someone in a position of trust and authority shows a pattern of behavior, seeking out opportunities for unsupervised access to children, creating situations where he could be alone with them, targeting vulnerable kids, it raises red flags. And yes, I think it's worth investigating whether Franklin Nash abused other children. Another reporter, Mr. De Leon called you a bitter son-in-law. He says you've always disliked Colonel Nash. That's true. I didn't particularly like Franklin Nash. I found him arrogant and controlling. But that's not why I'm doing this. I'm doing this because he hurt my son. And I would do this whether he was my father-in-law, my best friend, or a complete stranger. Child abuse is child abuse, regardless of who commits it. The questions kept coming, rapid fire. Roger answered them all calmly, methodically, never losing his composure. Lisa stood beside him, silent but solid, her presence lending credibility to his claims. Finally, Roger held up the folder he'd brought. I'm releasing these documents to the press today. They include the medical reports from Riverside Memorial Hospital detailing Tommy's injuries. They include statements from medical professionals confirming that these injuries are consistent with abuse, not with accidental trauma. They include the timeline of Tommy's behavioral changes over the past 3 months. And they include my email to parents and the responses I've received, both supportive and hostile. I'm sharing this because I believe in transparency. Franklin Nash wants to fight this in the court of public opinion? Fine. Let the public see all the evidence and decide for themselves. He handed copies to the journalists. They swarmed, grabbing the documents, already typing on their phones, live tweeting the press conference. Roger looked directly into the camera. Franklin Nash says he's a victim, but the real victim is my son, and the other children Franklin may have hurt. And I will not rest until every one of those children has justice. The press conference ended. The reporters scattered to file their stories. Roger and Lisa stood alone in the conference room, the adrenaline slowly draining from their systems. Did we do the right thing? Lisa asked quietly. I don't know, Roger admitted. But we did the only thing we could do. Franklin Nash's press conference at noon was held at the Riverside Falls Community Center, a much larger venue than Roger had chosen. The place was packed, not just with journalists, but with supporters. Roger watched it live-streamed on his phone from the safety of his office. Franklin stood at the podium wearing his dress uniform, his medals on full display. Behind him stood Marion Nash, looking small and frightened, and a phalanx of Franklin's friends. Judge McCall, Sheriff Monroe, Mayor Cannon, dozens of others. A show of force. I stand before you today, a broken man, Franklin began, his voice wavering. Not because of what I've been accused of, I know I'm innocent, but because my own grandson, a boy I love more than my own life, has been coached to say terrible things about me. Because my daughter, Lisa, has been manipulated into betraying her own father. Because this community, which I've served for 30 years, is now questioning everything I've ever done. He paused, dabbed at his eyes with a handkerchief. Roger Downing has declared war on me. He's used his skills as a filmmaker to create a false narrative. He's encouraged other families to imagine abuse where none exists. He's turned my own family against me. And why? Because he's always resented me. Because I wouldn't rubber stamp every decision he made about raising my grandson. Because I dared to question his parenting choices. The crowd murmured sympathetically. Franklin continued. I volunteered with this community's children because I believe in giving back. Because I believe in mentoring the next generation. Because I love kids. And now that love, that commitment, is being twisted into something ugly. If Roger Downing succeeds in this witch hunt, what message does that send? That anyone who works with children is suspect? That any grandfather can be accused without evidence? That reputations built over decades can be destroyed in days? Sheriff Monroe stepped up to the microphone. I've known Franklin Nash for 25 years. We served together. I trust this man with my life, and I trust him with my children. What's happening to him is a travesty. And I want the people of Riverside Falls to know that the Sheriff's Department has investigated these allegations thoroughly. We found no evidence of wrongdoing beyond the claims of one child who may be confused or influenced. Roger nearly threw his phone across the room. No evidence beyond Tommy's claims? What about the medical reports? What about the forensic interview? What about the 12 other families who'd come forward? But he understood the game being played. Sheriff Monroe and Franklin were friends. Monroe was protecting his own, and in a small town, those loyalties ran deep. The press conference ended with Franklin announcing the formation of a legal defense fund and a promise to clear his name and restore his reputation. The crowd applauded. People lined up to shake his hand, to hug Marion, to express their support. Roger watched it all and felt something cold and hard settle in his chest. The legal system was going to fail Tommy. It was already failing him. The powers that be in Riverside Falls had chosen their side, and it wasn't the side of justice, which meant Roger was going to have to take matters into his own hands. That evening, after Tommy was in bed and Lisa had fallen into an exhausted sleep, Roger went down to his basement. He'd converted half of it into a studio space years ago, a place to review footage, to edit, to work on projects that required privacy. He pulled up everything he had on Franklin Nash. The files Michael had sent over about Franklin's properties. He owned the family home, had a hunting cabin about 40 miles north near the National Forest, and a storage unit at U-Store on the edge of town. Jared had dug into Franklin's finances and found some interesting patterns. Regular cash withdrawals, no clear record of what the money was used for. Not enough to prove anything, but suggestive. Roger had also received a call that afternoon from a woman named Judith Warren, whose brother had been in Franklin's Boy Scout troop 20 years ago. "My brother killed himself when he was 19, Judith had said, her voice thick with old grief. He never said why, but he developed serious addiction problems after spending time in the Scouts. I always wondered, but Franklin Nash was so respected I never thought. Roger had taken her statement, recorded it, promised to pass it to the police. But he knew that historical accusations would be nearly impossible to prove, especially with the victim deceased. The pieces were there. The pattern was there. But proving in court was going to be a nightmare, especially with half the town lining up to defend Franklin. Roger pulled up a document he'd been working on, a comprehensive list of every vulnerable point in Franklin's life. His routines, his habits, his relationships. The people he'd alienated over the years, because despite Franklin's public persona, Roger had found cracks. A business partner who'd split with him acrimoniously 15 years ago. A former church member who'd left First Baptist over philosophical differences with Franklin's leadership. A nephew, Floyd Gillespie, who'd cut off all contact with the Nash family 10 years ago and now lived in California. Roger started making calls. Floyd answered on the third ring, his voice wary. "Who is this? Floyd Gillespie? My name is Roger Downing. I'm married to your cousin, Lisa Nash. Franklin Nash is my father-in-law." A long pause. "I don't talk about Franklin. I need you to. He hurt my son. He's hurt other children. And I need to know if he hurt you. I can't talk about this. Floyd, please. I'm not looking to dredge up your past for no reason. But if you have information that could help protect other kids. You think your son is the first." Floyd's voice was bitter now. "You think I'm the first? Franklin's been doing this for decades. And everyone knows, and no one does anything, because he's Colonel fucking Nash, war hero, community pillar. People like him don't get held accountable." Roger's pulse quickened. "Will you go on record? Will you tell the police what happened? And have my name dragged through the mud? Have my life dissected? Have people call me a liar, or worse, say I wanted it? No fucking way. What if you didn't have to face Franklin? What if there was a way to expose him without you being directly involved?" "Ow!" Roger thought quickly. "You said everyone knows. That means there are people out there who've seen things, who've suspected things, who've stayed quiet. If I can get those people talking, not in court but publicly, it creates a narrative. It creates pressure. Eventually, someone will break. Someone will come forward officially. You're talking about a smear campaign. I'm talking about the truth." Floyd was quiet for a moment. "There's a guy, Eduardo Roberson. He used to work maintenance at First Baptist Church, back when Franklin was running the youth programs. He got fired about 12 years ago, said something to the pastor about Franklin being inappropriate with the kids. The pastor didn't believe him, fired him for making false accusations. Eduardo might talk to you. He's got nothing to lose now. He's been blacklisted in this town anyway." Roger wrote down the name. "Thank you, Floyd. And I'm sorry for what happened to you. Just stop him," Floyd said. "That's all I want. Stop him before he hurts anyone else." Roger spent the next 2 hours tracking down Eduardo Roberson. He'd moved to a trailer park outside of town, worked odd jobs, kept a low profile. Roger finally reached him by phone at 10 p.m. Mr. Roberson, my name is Roger Downing. I'm investigating Franklin Nash. I understand you once made allegations. I don't want trouble, Eduardo interrupted. I said what I saw, and it cost me everything. I'm not doing that again. What did you see? A long pause. Roger could hear a TV in the background, kin laughter from sitcom. Finally, Eduardo said, I saw him touching a boy in the church basement after youth group. The boy looked uncomfortable, tried to pull away. Nash saw me watching and said it was horseplay, that kids these days don't know how to roughhouse anymore. But I knew what I saw. When I reported it, the pastor said I misunderstood, that Franklin would never. And then I was let go for budget reasons. Would you testify to that? Against Franklin Nash? With half the town on his side? I'd be crucified. But if enough people came forward, if you weren't alone, then maybe. But I'm not sticking my neck out to be the first. Roger understood. Fear was a powerful silencer. And Franklin had built his power on making sure people were too afraid, too isolated to speak up. But fear worked both ways. The next morning, Roger did something he'd never done before in his professional career. He used his documentary skills not to uncover truth, but to engineer it. He created a website. Simple, clean, professional. He called it the Franklin Nash Project. On it, he posted the medical documentation of Tommy's abuse, Lisa's statement, and the transcript of Tommy's forensic interview, redacted to protect Tommy's identity. He included the statements from the 12 families who'd expressed concerns. But he also did something more controversial. He created a public forum where people could anonymously share their experiences with Franklin Nash. Moderated, verified as much as possible, but anonymous. Within hours, the posts started coming in. Franklin Nash coached my son's little league team. After practice one day, I came back to pick up something I'd forgotten and found Nash alone in the dugout with my son. My son looked scared. When I asked what was happening, Nash said they were just talking about the game. But my son wouldn't talk to me about it. I should have pushed harder. I was in Franklin's Boy Scout troop in 1995. He took us on a camping trip. I remember feeling uncomfortable with how much he touched us. Pats on the back, arm around shoulders, tousling hair. At the time, I thought it was just how adults interacted with kids. Looking back, it feels wrong. Franklin Nash volunteered at my daughter's school. She came home one day, crying, said Coach Nash had hugged her, and it felt icky. I called the school to complain. The principal told me I was overreacting, that Franklin was a respected volunteer, and my daughter was probably just uncomfortable with physical affection. I dropped it. I wish I hadn't. 20 posts. 30. 50. A cascade of concerns, observations, suspicions that individually seemed minor, but collectively painted a picture of a man who'd spent decades crossing boundaries, testing limits, grooming victims. None of it would hold up in court. All of it was circumstantial, historical, unverified. But it was public, and it was devastating. Roger's website crashed from traffic within 6 hours of going live. He moved it to a more robust server. By the end of the day, it had been shared across social media thousands of times. Local news picked it up, then regional news, then national news. Prominent Oregon community leader faces growing allegations of child abuse, read the headline in the Oregonian. Clifton De Leon issued a statement calling the website a coordinated attack designed to destroy my client's reputation through innuendo and anonymous accusations. He threatened legal action, but the damage was done. The narrative had shifted. Franklin Nash was no longer just defending himself against one family's accusations. He was defending himself against a community's growing realization that they'd been protecting a predator. On the 5th day after Roger discovered Tommy's bruises, ADA Marissa Donovan called with news. We're filing formal charges, she said. Multiple counts of child abuse against Tommy. And we have 2 additional families who've come forward willing to testify. Their children were in Franklin's Little League program and church youth group. Their stories corroborate Tommy's account. Roger felt something loosen in his chest. When? The indictment will be issued tomorrow morning. Franklin Nash will be arraigned within 48 hours. This is happening, Roger. We're taking him down. What about bail? With multiple victims and the public attention this case is getting, I'm going to argue for remand. But I can't guarantee the judge will agree, especially since Judge McCall recused himself, and we've got Judge Rodolfo Noble from the county seat handling this. Noble's fair, but conservative. He might see Franklin as low flight risk, given his age and community ties. If he gets out again, he won't get near Tommy or any other child. The conditions will be strict. Electronic monitoring, no internet access, no contact with minors. We'll make sure of it. After they hung up, Roger told Lisa. She cried. Relief and grief tangled together. They told Tommy together, keeping it simple. The police are making sure Grandpa Franklin can't hurt you or anyone else. Tommy nodded solemnly. Good. He should be in jail. He will be, buddy. I promise. That night, Roger allowed himself to hope. The legal system was working. Slowly, imperfectly, but working. Franklin Nash was going to be held accountable. But Roger's phone rang at 2 a.m., shattering that hope. Detective Ellison's voice was tight. Roger, there's been an incident. Franklin Nash is in the hospital. He attempted suicide, overdose of pills. He's in critical condition. Roger sat up in bed, his mind racing. Is he going to make it? Touch and go. But Roger, there's something else. Marion Nash is claiming you drove him to this. She's telling reporters that your website, your press conference, your campaign destroyed him. She's saying that if Franklin dies, it's on your hands. That's bullshit. I know that. You know that. But the narrative is shifting again. Franklin's going to be seen as a victim, and you're going to be seen as the aggressor. Be prepared for backlash. Roger hung up and stared at the ceiling. Attempted suicide. It could be genuine, the act of a guilty man who saw no way out. Or it could be calculated, a sympathy play, a way to delay the trial, a method to paint himself as the real victim. Either way, it complicated everything. Franklin Nash survived. He spent 3 days in the ICU, then was moved to a secure psychiatric facility for evaluation. The arraignment was postponed. The charges still stood, but the momentum had stalled. And Marion Nash went on every news program that would have her, tearful and devastated, talking about how her husband had been persecuted and destroyed by false allegations. She never mentioned Tommy by name, but the implication was clear. Roger had weaponized his son against an innocent man, and the stress had literally almost killed Franklin. Public opinion split down the middle. Half of Riverside Falls believed Franklin was guilty in faking his suicide attempt. The other half believed he was innocent and being martyred. Roger and Lisa became pariahs. Someone spray-painted liar on their garage door. Tommy's school asked if they'd consider homeschooling him for his own safety after other parents complained. First Baptist Church officially revoked their membership. Roger's documentary work dried up. Clients who'd been interested in projects suddenly stopped returning calls. The message was clear. Associating with Roger Downing was career suicide. But Roger had never been in this for his career. He spent every waking hour digging deeper into Franklin's past, following leads, interviewing anyone who'd talked to him. Jared helped, and so did Michael, and so did a small but growing network of people who believed Tommy, who'd had their own suspicions about Franklin for years. And slowly, painstakingly, they built a case that went beyond Tommy's testimony. They found financial records showing Franklin had rented a hunting cabin, separate from the one he owned, under a false name 15 years ago. They tracked down former occupants of that cabin who remembered seeing Franklin there with young boys. They found old church directories and cross-referenced them with police reports of children who'd gone missing or run away over the past 2 decades. 3 of those children had been in Franklin's youth programs. One had been found dead, ruled an accidental drowning. The other 2 had never been found. They discovered that Franklin had a sealed juvenile record from when he was 17, sexual assault charges that had been expunged as part of a plea deal. His victim had been a neighbor's child. The pattern went back decades. Franklin Nash hadn't suddenly become an abuser. He'd been one his entire life. He'd just gotten better at hiding it, at using his status and reputation as armor. Roger compiled everything into a comprehensive dossier, hundreds of pages of evidence, testimony, financial records, timelines. He gave copies to ADA Donovan, to Detective Ellison and to 3 journalists he trusted. "This is beyond what we can use in Tommy's case," Donovan warned. "But it might be enough to open additional investigations. Maybe even federal involvement if we can connect Franklin to any interstate activity." "Do it," Roger said. "Throw everything at him. Make sure he never sees the outside of a prison cell." Franklin Nash was released from the psychiatric facility 3 weeks after his suicide attempt, deemed stable and not a threat to himself. His arraignment was scheduled for the following Monday. But Roger wasn't waiting for the courts anymore. The Sunday before Franklin's arraignment, Roger aired a documentary he'd been working on in secret, Sins of the Father, the Franklin Nash story. He'd pieced together interviews with Floyd Gillespie, who'd finally agreed to go public, with Eduardo Roberson, with 4 other men who'd been in Franklin's Boy Scout troop or youth programs over the years. He'd included the medical documentation, the forensic interviews, the financial evidence. He'd created a timeline of Franklin's predation that spanned 40 years. And he'd ended it with footage of Tommy, face obscured, voice altered, saying simply, "I want other kids to know they're not alone. And I want bad grown-ups to know they can't get away with hurting us forever." Roger premiered the documentary on YouTube, on his website, on every social media platform simultaneously. He didn't care about distribution rights or proper release protocols. He cared about the truth reaching as many people as possible before Franklin or his lawyers could suppress it. Within 12 hours, the documentary had been viewed 2 million times. Within 24 hours, 3 more victims had come forward to police, including one from Franklin's time in the military, a fellow soldier's son who'd been abused during a base assignment in Germany in 1989. Within 48 hours, the FBI had opened an investigation into Franklin Nash for potential federal crimes related to child exploitation. And within 72 hours, Clifton De Leon withdrew as Franklin's attorney, citing irreconcilable differences with the client. Franklin Nash stood alone. The arraignment on Monday was a circus. Media from across the country descended on Riverside Falls. Franklin appeared in a wheelchair, looking 20 years older, playing the frail, elderly victim to the end. But Judge Noble wasn't buying it. He'd seen Roger's documentary. He'd read the FBI reports. And he'd heard enough. "Mr. Nash, you are charged with multiple counts of child abuse, sexual exploitation of a minor, and endangerment. Given the severity of the charges, the number of alleged victims, and the extensive evidence presented, I'm denying bail and remanding you to county custody pending trial. You are a danger to the community and a flight risk despite your age and health. You will remain in custody." Franklin's face went white. Marion Nash screamed from the gallery. But the gavel came down, and Franklin was led away in handcuffs. Roger sat in the courtroom, Lisa beside him, Tommy safe at home with Michael. And for the first time in 3 weeks, he felt like he could breathe. The trial took place 4 months later. By then, the case against Franklin Nash had grown to include 18 victims across 4 decades. The evidence was overwhelming. Medical records, financial documents, testimony from dozens of witnesses, forensic analysis of the hunting cabin where Franklin had taken several victims. Roger testified about finding Tommy's bruises, about the hospital visit, about the forensic interview. Lisa testified about her father's controlling behavior, about the red flags she'd missed. Tommy didn't have to testify in person. His recorded forensic interview was played for the jury. The defense tried to argue that Franklin was being targeted because of his prominence, that the victims were misremembering or exaggerating, that Roger had orchestrated a campaign of false allegations. But the jury saw through it. They deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Franklin Nash was sentenced to 45 years in prison without the possibility of parole. He would die behind bars. Roger sat on the porch of their house. They'd moved to a different neighborhood after the spray painting incident, somewhere with fewer memories, and watched Tommy play in the yard. It was spring now, nearly a year since that day at the park. Tommy was in therapy twice a week, making progress. The nightmares had decreased. The thumb-sucking had stopped. He smiled more often. Lisa came out with 2 mugs of coffee, sat beside Roger. Detective Ellison called. Franklin had a stroke in prison. He's paralyzed on one side, can barely speak. He'll be in the prison infirmary for the rest of his life. Roger nodded. He didn't feel satisfaction exactly, but he felt closure. Franklin Nash was suffering the consequences of his actions. He'd lost everything. His freedom, his health, his reputation, his family. Marion filed for divorce. Lisa added quietly. Finally, she sent me a letter. She says she believes me now, believes Tommy. She says she's sorry she didn't see it, didn't protect me when I was a kid. Did he hurt you too? Roger asked gently. Lisa was quiet for a long moment. I don't remember anything specific, but I have gaps. Times I can't account for. Feelings I can't explain. My therapist thinks maybe I repressed memories. Maybe someday they'll come back. Maybe they won't. Either way, I'm dealing with it. She leaned into Roger's shoulder. Thank you for believing Tommy. For fighting for him. A lot of fathers wouldn't have. Of course I believed him. He's my son. It should be that simple, Lisa said. But it's not for a lot of families. We were lucky you didn't hesitate. They sat in companionable silence, watching Tommy chase a butterfly across the grass. He was laughing, pure and joyful, the sound of a child who was healing. Roger's phone buzzed. An email from 88 Donovan. The FBI investigation identified 14 additional victims in 3 states, all from Franklin's military service days. Without your documentary and website, we never would have found them. You saved lives, Roger. Thank you. Roger didn't respond. He just watched his son play and felt the weight of the past year begin to lift. They'd won. Not perfectly, not without scars, but they'd won. Tommy was safe. Franklin was gone, and other children had been spared the same fate. 6 months later, Roger received an award from a national child advocacy organization for his work exposing Franklin Nash. He donated the money to the Child Advocacy Center that had helped Tommy. He gave a speech about believing children, about the importance of breaking the silence, about how predators rely on communities to look away. And then he went home to Tommy, who was thriving now, back to being a normal 7-year-old obsessed with dinosaurs and video games and riding his bike too fast down the street. Dad, Tommy called from the driveway. Watch this trick. Roger watched his son pop a wheelie, watched him nearly wipe out, but recover at the last second. Watched him grin with pride at his own skill. That was awesome, buddy. Roger called back. And it was. Everything about this moment, the ordinariness of it, the safety of it, the joy of it, was awesome. Franklin Nash had tried to destroy that joy, had tried to steal Tommy's childhood. But he'd failed, because Roger had been paying attention, had acted quickly, had refused to let power and reputation shield a predator. Later that evening, after Tommy was asleep, Roger and Lisa sat in their living room. The TV was on low, some mindless sitcom neither of them were really watching. I've been thinking about the future, Lisa said. About what we do now. What do you mean? We can't stay in Riverside Falls. Too many memories, too much history. And honestly, I want Tommy to grow up somewhere people don't know his story, where he can just be a kid. Roger nodded. He'd been thinking the same thing. Where do you want to go? Somewhere bigger. Portland, maybe? Or Seattle. Somewhere we can disappear into the crowd. Start over. I like that, Roger said. And he meant it. Riverside Falls had never felt like home. It had always been Lisa's town, Franklin's town. Now it was just the place where the worst thing in their lives had happened. I want Tommy to remember, Lisa said quietly, that he was brave, that he told the truth, that he helped protect other kids. I want that to be part of his story, not just the trauma. It will be, Roger assured her. He's a fighter. He gets that from his mom. Lisa smiled, the first genuine smile Roger had seen from her in months. And from his dad. They sat together in the quiet house, planning their future, choosing hope over fear. Outside, the world kept turning. Franklin Nash rotted in a prison cell. Other predators went about their business, hiding in plain sight. But Tommy Downing was safe. And he knew, without question, that his father would always protect him, would always believe him, would move heaven and earth to keep him from harm. That was worth everything Roger had sacrificed, his reputation, his career, his place in the community. Because at the end of the day, none of that mattered as much as his son's safety, his son's healing, his son's ability to grow up knowing he was loved and protected. Roger looked at the photo on the mantle, Tommy at his 6th birthday party, cake-smeared and grinning, held between Roger and Lisa. Taken just 3 weeks before everything fell apart. Now they'd rebuild. Slowly, carefully, but they'd rebuild. And Tommy would grow up knowing that when monsters came calling, his parents had stood between him and the darkness. Always. Roger's phone buzzed one last time. A message from Jared. Documentary won the regional Emmy. They want you at the ceremony. Bringing awareness to child abuse, changing the conversation. You did good, man. Roger didn't care about awards, but he cared about the conversation changing. He cared about other parents being more vigilant. He cared about communities learning that predators didn't always look like monsters. Sometimes they looked like decorated veterans and beloved grandfathers. He texted back, "Thanks. We'll be there." Then he turned off his phone, pulled Lisa close, and let himself feel something he hadn't felt in a year. Peace. It wasn't perfect peace. There would be more therapy, more hard conversations, more moments when the past intruded on the present. But it was enough. They'd survived. They'd fought back. They'd won. And tomorrow, they'd start planning their move to Portland, start imagining a future where Tommy's story was about resilience and recovery, not just trauma. Where Roger and Lisa's story was about choosing their child over family loyalty, about doing the hard thing even when it cost them everything. The TV flickered in the background. The house settled into its nighttime creaks and sighs. And the Downing family, battered but not broken, began the long work of healing. Outside, in a prison cell 200 miles away, Franklin Nash stared at the ceiling and lived with the knowledge that he'd finally been stopped. That his victims had been believed. That his power had meant nothing in the end. Justice, Roger thought, didn't always look like courtrooms and gavels. Sometimes it looked like a father kneeling in wood chips at a playground, paying attention when his son asked him to look. Sometimes it looked like choosing truth over comfort. Sometimes it looked like burning down your entire life to protect the person you love most. And sometimes justice looked like a 7-year-old boy doing wheelies in his driveway, laughing and free, his nightmares fading, his future bright. Roger closed his eyes and let that image fill his mind. That was justice enough. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.